She first sent and said the doctor was thinking her medicine, and then she texted right under it and said tweaking her medicine. So anyway, she's out, and then Emily Green that visits, that's tries to be here, is not here. She didn't say why, and I didn't ask, but she did tell me that she wouldn't be. We are on page 37, and we finished last week was with this subject of when we ask why, and that when we do ask why is a time that we need to put our trust in God. In the beginning of last week's lesson, again, I want us to think on this. The name of this lesson was how to searching for sense in tragedy. And tragedy is an event causing great suffering, destruction, or distress, a disastrous event, a calamity. Then cause is a person or a thing that gives rise to an action to make something happen, especially something bad. And that question we always ask, what caused it? Such and such happened, what caused it? And so that is cause. Allow is to fail to prevent or to restrain. And evil is a force that causes bad things. And so these things we are looking at here when we ask why, because so many people say, well, I can't believe God did so and so. God did not do anything bad. But God allows, because otherwise we would be robots. If God did not allow anything bad to ever happen to us, how would we grow? How would we be strengthened? How could we learn to depend on Him? Because I want to tell you, in my opinion, I can't give you chapter and verse for this, but the better things are for us, the less dependent we become on God. Because if everything is just rosy with no blips in them, then, everything's okay. I think I've told you all this story, but I'll tell it again, about the family that had moved in the community. They weren't coming to church, and the preacher kept going to see them, and we'll be there. And then he called the preacher, the father called the preacher, and the son had been bitten by a rattlesnake and was in the hospital. He said, if you'll just come pray for him. So the preacher went up there, and he said, if you'll pray for him, if you'll be okay, we'll be in services every time the door's open. And the preacher knelt and prayed, Lord, send us bigger and better rattlesnakes. And so I always think of that when we have a problem, we know how to pray. I think of the scripture in Romans that talks about the corruption of people. And it gives all of this list of what all they are. And in the midst of that, it says, and neither were they thankful. And so the two things that I think that come from tragedy, that it strengthens us and it makes us more thankful for the way it is. So that's my opinion there. So we're on page 37, ended with the statement in Hebrews, I will put my trust in him. We're down to number 2. I've already changed 2 words there because it says 2 stories and the story of Job. And I marked out stories and wrote accounts. These are not Grimm's fairy tales. These are not bedtime stories. These are accounts of what happened to these 2 men. So I'll start at the back this evening. Katrina, if you will read down to the end of that page, please. Start with number 2 on page 37.
All right. 2 accounts, the Job account. I do not pretend to understand all the ramifications of the first 2 chapters of Job. I do understand that away from human eyes, there was a confrontation over the faith of this godly man. Job 1:9 through 12 and 2 through 7.
Let's stop and read that.
Okay.
Anybody there? Well, I am. Job 1:9 says, so Satan answered, well, the question was in 8, then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil? Wouldn't you love for God to say that about you?
Well, see, and then here I am thinking the opposite. Why did God just throw him under the bus? Like, why did God just say, hey, here's Job. Have you thought about testing him?
Well, there you go. So Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for nothing? So maybe God knew that Job would be approved beyond any of us. We would probably not have stood there. But, okay, go ahead.
Okay. God granted Satan permission to make life hard on Job, and he did. Sure, you and I are privy to the bigger picture, but not Job. All he knew was what he experienced at the moment: incredible loss, pain, and misery. The longest section of the book consists of a conversation between Job and 3 friends. Although they came to comfort him, instead they added to his suffering. They thought they had the answer to his why question. In human brilliance, they declared, Job, you must be guilty of something. Everyone knows only bad people suffer. That made no more sense to Job than it means to you.
So, do we believe this? Do we believe everyone knows only bad people suffer? Well, why do you say, well, he got what he deserves? Have you ever said that? So,
some people actually bring calamity on themselves. So they deserve it. They brought it on themselves.
that bad people suffer.
So there it is. But not always. There are different reasons for suffering.
All people suffer.
Yes.
But I'm just saying that when we make the remark, well, he got what he deserved, I hope he gets what he deserves. You know, it was a thought. Because I have said it recently.
I think the word is really is karma.
Yeah, well, same thing. It's always been karma. But I think that comes from some idol worshiper. So there you go. All right, Jeannie, can you read section 3 there down to the big B?
Yes, ma'am. Job's perspective changed. However, when he came to terms with God's unfathomable greatness, it was then he realized he had been asking the wrong question. Job focused so much on the unanswerable why that he lost sight of the almighty who. 40:1-4 and 42:3. In all of this, Job learned 2 essential life lessons. First, he learned that behind the apparent randomness of life is the existence of the Creator. In other words, God is in control, even when it appears he is not. Our God reigns. It must be the clarion call of his children, even in the midst of suffering. Second, he learned that in suffering, God gave him tremendous power, the power of choice and how to respond. Job's response, unknown to him, had repercussions in the heavenly realm. Job's life, his faith, and his choices when it came to suffering mattered to God a lot. So do yours.
And I want us from that little section right there. The thing I want us to be sure that we understand is that Satan must have God's permission to do something to God's children. Now Satan has free reign with the world, but when it comes to God's children, Satan that can't just willy-nilly do anything he wants to. We have to remember that the power of God is taught, that's our protection. That doesn't mean nothing bad will ever happen to us. Nature itself, God set in motion the nature, and a tornado may blow your house away. I don't mean that Satan went to God and said, can I have permission to put a tornado to blow her? No. I'm saying when we're talking about these things that are personal to us, like these things were of Job, when it has to do with God, God reigns. Satan does not have the power. That's where this saying came from that became so cutesy and so prevalent. Well, the devil made me do it. No, the devil did not make you do it. You were drawn away by your own desire and sinned. The devil didn't make you do that. The devil gave you a choice and you took it. And so whatever sin that we do, this is not. Now, Job here didn't really have a choice in what was happening to him. As in sometimes we don't seem to have the choice. What we have a choice is how we respond to what happens to us. And that's where it's hard. Because if we respond by doubting God, or doubting the power of prayer, or doubting that God is even there, how could this all be happening to poor little me? No. God's there. You're not. We need to watch our minds in thinking about that God is not always in control, because he is, always. And every time, Amy didn't tell me this wild story till this year, maybe last year. Every time I think about those scouts coming to check out for the hummingbirds.
They don't go back, they just stay.
What if they're scouting? How are they telling?
Well, they find a good spot and they stay there, and when the others come, they nest with them.
Well, they could get there by themselves. Why are they a scout? I'm just saying, nature itself. And the scripture says, doesn't nature itself teach you?
And put your fingers out in that secret, by the way.
Anyway, I haven't gotten over that. B, starting at B. Jeannie, can you read down to the end of that first paragraph on the next page, please?
I can. The Joseph story. After multiple iniquities over a span of 2 decades, Joseph eventually arose to become second in command to Egypt's Pharaoh, where he oversaw the nation's food supply in a time of both feast and famine. Guess who came to Egypt to buy food during the famine? Number 1, it is easy to read the Genesis story and smile at the family reunion. Joseph reunites with his brothers, forgives them, and moves his aging father into the Goshen suburbs where they will live the rest of their lives. The end. Yet it isn't the end, because it isn't really the story. There's a second story behind the first, a story Joseph would not live to see. Although he suffered, God would overcome evil and good. He would use one man's unjust suffering as a means to get his family to Egypt. It was there they would grow into a great nation and eventually be led to freedom by Moses. And then they would be given a law and a land, and from them would one day be born a Savior who would bless the world. Genesis 12, 1-3. The Job and Joseph stories remind us that our lives fit into a holy plan beyond what our eyes can see and our minds can comprehend. Neither had any idea that their decisions of faith in relation to suffering would impact lives for centuries to come. Genesis 50:20. One thing is for sure, their stories live in history as a testimony to the power of God's grace over evil.
And do you know, those of you who, besides your study, read the Bible through after about the 20th time that you read the Old Testament, you begin to see how everything fit to bring Jesus. Everything from the time Eve sinned until the birth of Jesus. Everything that happened came about exact when when they were disobedient and God in some areas it just wiped out thousands at a time, and you just almost cringe when you read some of the things there. But then you go on a few chapters and you see why that was necessary, that they were bringing idolatry into the camp. They were bringing foreign wives into the camp. They had to keep that lineage pure because Jesus was coming from the seed of Abraham, from the seed of David. It had to all connect. And it is just such a powerful thing that it began with the tragedy of Joseph being sold into slavery to a foreign land at about 17 years old.
But what strikes me in both of these stories is he has said repeatedly, Job didn't know what God was planning. Joseph didn't know what God was planning. If they had, how would they be tested to see if they had trust in God or faith in God to continue?
Yes.
And I think that's where that verse that says no one can snatch us out of his hand. We're there. It's up to us whether we let Satan snatch us.
And then it's our willingly going. We're not forced.
Yes.
And so this is just, when you think of the power of God and He sees in our lives the whole story, not just what we see yesterday and today. You know, we can't see what tomorrow, but God can. And so I love the way it comes together. When it comes to your life, who knows how one experience of tragedy can set in motion a chain of events that can bring about good for years to come. God can triumph over evil, but only if you let Him work in your life. And so things that to us at a set time are a major tragedy in our lives and may last for months or years. And then when you get as old as I am, and you look back and see, well, if that hadn't happened, this would have never happened. And if this had never happened, this would have never happened. If we follow God, it'll be all right. If not in this life, it'll be all right. You know, I told y'all about, I don't know where I heard that, because this old woman said, quit praying for me to live. And I don't know that we look forward to heaven as strongly as we should.
You know, I think we all, for different reasons, may ask why. It's not questioning God, it's just, we just want to know, and that's what our prayer should be. Give me the hope, give me that peace of knowing and how to do it and how to choose. And, you know, I think if we see that bigger picture, just like Joseph did, he said this all came.
God meant it for good, yes.
Meant it for good, exactly. And I think that's what we have to remember during those really hard times. And it's hard.
It is.
And it's easy to say, why? You know, but it's not, you're just asking for help. You know, it doesn't mean, well, why'd you do this to me? You know, I think it's another way that you can say why. It's just
and I think well, we're going to get into this next, where Hannah, Sydney, would you read that next section, please?
Two truths. Suffering is part of the freedom of choice. God made man a free moral agent. In other words, we were free to make good choices or bad ones. And so is everyone else. Some people make choices that affect themselves and others in tragic ways. Question. Because some make bad choices, do you want God to take away the right given to everyone, including you? Suffering is no respecter of persons. Why me is not the question. The better question is, why not me? What is so special about me that I dare demand that God deliver me from all pain and present me with the perfect life? The very thought approaches arrogance. Job was right when he declared in chapter 2, verse 10, shall we indeed accept good from God and not accept the curse of evil? It's the ultimate question. A world of fairness may give us what we think we want. On the other hand, a world of grace gives us more than we ever deserve.
And I think, Anita, what I was going to say about that was, I do understand we all ask why about everything. I mean, why is the question about anything, even why does this coat taste flat? You know, why, from little children, you tell them something and they say why. But we have to be careful that we don't let that become a question of why did God do this to me? Because God didn't do this to me. And Amy mentioned earlier about people making choices that have results. And it can be good results, like it was with Joseph, that they had a place to build this nation because of what happened to Joseph. But there's not any of us that do any sin that doesn't affect someone else. There's no such thing as a decision in your life affecting only you. Doesn't affect only you. Because every one of us that is a mother knows your child's decisions certainly affect us. And I'm pretty sure some of you children know that your parents' and grandparents' decisions certainly affect you. So there's no such thing as being responsible to no one.
I think one lesson that I had to learn, took me a long time to learn, was we won't always know why. Even though we ask it and we want to know, and I think that especially us as women want to know. And I remember when I lost the first baby, that was the big thing I got hung up on. And I would cry to baby and say, doctors can't tell me why, I can't find out why. Like, did I do something wrong, or I just want to know why? And I said that over and over and over again. And so then, I don't know if it was Divine or Faith that it, but our preacher preached a long sermon on asking why. And I learned and I grew through that, but sometimes we just don't know why. And I come up with possible different scenarios, you know, Gage wouldn't be here, maybe the world needed Gage. Or maybe that baby was gonna do something in this way to sure him to heaven. You know, there's so many different things that me as a mom come up with, but in the end, I don't know why, and I trust that God knows why. That's a long lesson for me, but it was really powerful.
And even when we make bad choices, there again, even God uses our bad choices sometimes to bring about good, and that's what Joseph said. Because those brothers that sold him into Egypt was a bad thing, but the consequences God turned to good. So the white thing. All right, on page 40.
One thing that I think about my granddaughter, we lived close to her, so I was able to spend a lot of time with her. And she would tell me, and the other girls, don't ask why, ask if. If I do this, if, you know, should I do this, if, ask if.
Instead of why.
Ask if.
Okay, let me see who I'm going to choose for this. I think I'll choose Maddie for this. How would you respond to a friend who, knowing you are a believer, asks you to explain the why of senseless tragedy, or ask, where is God when I hurt?
Well, that's two different questions. So
All right.
We're going to do them separately. So if I had a friend come to me and ask me why it's related to a senseless tragedy, I would go back to what he said about suffering as part of freedom of choice. And that other people's actions affect us as well. It's not always super clear. But tragedy happens to everyone. Always. And I read ahead a little bit, and I love what he starts the next chapter with. He said, God is real no matter how you feel.
I love it. I love it. Yes. And Amy, not Amy, my daughter-in-law, her name is Natasha. Natasha was it you, Natasha, that was talking about that may not have been you at all. I was in New York City after 9/11.
Yes, we talked about that.
Okay. And so that's what that reporter asked me. Where was God when that happened? And so I told him.
Great soul. I would tell you, don't you think that was divine that the reporter went to her?
I said, God was where he always is, in total control. And so anyway, she wanted away from me a little sooner than she got away, but it was interesting. Anybody else have a comment on that number one question there?
Where is God when I hurt? That question is not difficult. He's there. You have to take advantage.
Yes.
You have to go.
You have to be there.
You have to turn toward him. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. If you are his child, he is as close as you allow. Will he stop the hurting? No. Will he use this to your advantage if you allow him to? Yes. And so, all right, number 2, I know JD. According to James 1, 2, and 4, what is the purpose of suffering and trials? Why do you think some are able to handle trials better than others?
I think that you go through those difficult times because it's going to help you grow. Because like you said, if life is always just perfect, then how are you ever supposed to grow in a perfect environment? And I feel like it tests your faith and tests you to see, you know, if you can get through the tough times and if you're going to rely on God to help you through it. And then how others, I feel like, are able to handle trials better. I think it just goes back to where your relationship with Christ is before the trials happen. You know, like when things are going good and you really have that good relationship with Him and you're going to Him and still talking to Him even when things are good, I feel like it's going to be not easier, but it's going to be more
Easier.
yeah, but it's going to be easier to get through it rather if you had no relationship with Him prior to that.
Anybody else? I put that it strengthens and it produces patience. And this is a saving patience for you and for all those you can help. And I would say, why do some handle it better than others? It could be they have more experience. It could be they've had a lot of troubles and they've learned a long time ago. God's in control.
You know, sometimes people rely on their emotions to get them through instead of their faith in the prayer to God. So, you know, that's...
I'm going to tell you, Anita, I truly believe that our emotions, which are in our mind, that we have control of our mind. And I agree with you in that our emotions can be a real stumbling block if we allow it.
I've seen people leave the church because of a tragedy in their family. I mean, you know.
And another thing is that some people feel so sorry for themselves that they have no time for empathy or help to anyone else. It's all just me. And when we turn inward to where everything is about me, it can't be about God. So it's a tough thing. Emotions are a tough thing. Although it's natural to ask what if or if only, why is not productive to healing. Although it's natural to ask what if or if only, why is not productive to healing. So what do you think about that, Natasha?
Well, there's just simply no answer. It just simply goes in a circle. And in my after I figured out my writing, it will drive one nuts.
If they're not already. Yes.
Yeah, because you just can't ever come up with an answer. So it's just you're on the proverbial, squirrel wheel.
The what if and if only, I put both are based in fantasy. Both are based in fantasy. They're not in fact. And the reason that it can't be healing to you is it's a fantasy. And I'll tell you, that's where my worry is about all of our kids that are hooked in the video machine. It's all fantasy, nothing is real.
One of the speakers this weekend at WOW, when she was talking about courage and having faith to be courageous, and she said that that being courageous also meant that you were willing to let go. And if you're constantly sitting there asking what if or if only, you can't let go and just give it to God.
Exactly, and there is a saying in the certain community, counseling is not always a good thing, but there is a saying in that about let go and let God, but they're not talking about letting go and letting God. That their thing is that you can just, in the big book says that if you don't have a God, you just fake it till you make it. A doorknob can be your fixation. Well, and I used to think that was so strange, and then I thought, what would be the difference if you're gonna have an idol, whether it's a doorknob or a statue? And you laugh. What would be the difference? Okay, they don't think so either. There are times as parents when our children are confused or misunderstand our actions, answers, or reasons behind our decisions. Explaining adult rationale to young minds would only complicate the problem and give rise to further questions, the answers to which they wouldn't understand either. So we exercise our parental right, given their lack of maturity and experience, withhold confusing information and simply say, honey, on this issue, you're going to have to trust me. Or that translated, it can also be because I said so. Either one of those works. Does not God have the right to do the same with his children? And yes, all things work together for good to them that love God. Romans 8:28. We ought to memorize that and write it on our foreheads, because whatever you're going through, all things work together for good for those that love God. So if you don't see the good right now, obviously, God knows. So there you go. When it comes to human suffering, Job's friends had all the answers, or thought they did. In fact, Eliphaz declared in 4:7-22:5, whoever perished being innocent, and is not your wickedness great and your iniquities without end? In other words, he concluded that only bad people suffer. How would you answer? Well, I think we have answered that 2 or 3 times, so, and I'm watching the clock, and I have to end this because Amy said I had to. Why is Hebrews 2:13 a critical cornerstone of faith? So someone read Hebrews 2:13, just the first part.
And I will put my trust in him.
I will put my trust in him. Remember, he sees the beginning to the end. With him, it's not just this that we see. And sometimes when we think, if we are trying to teach or influence someone and we think, why can't they see that? Rather, the question might be, how can I explain this better?
And in school, as I have been so student, I have seen how the first grader's brain is not ready for the things that we're teaching the fifth graders, and they're not mature enough yet to do algebra or. And we're the same way. If we're not ready to handle that, we need to trust God with it.
Exactly. Exactly. A drunk driver slams into another vehicle. A man leaves his wife and children and runs off with his secretary. A student brings a gun to campus and begins shooting. In what way do these personal choices affect others? I want to go back to this definition of evil. A force that causes bad things. And when bad things happen, it affects everybody that knows about it. Everybody that hears about it. And all, of course, of all the people that are in it. But it sets in motion future events, is how it affects others. And then in Romans 12:21, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. How is that possible? Don't be overcome with evil. Overcome evil with good. How is that possible?
Choice. Choice.
Choice. Nobody else have an answer to that?
I accidentally opened up to Romans 12:12 instead of 12:21. It says, rejoice and hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer.
Very good. That's a pretty good answer. It sets in motion the future events, which is, when this happens, to overcome evil with good. One of the things we have to always have in mind, evil is the Satan versus God, but remember, God has already won. When Jesus was raised from the dead and ascended to heaven, there is no other battle except the battle we fight. And that battle is usually fought with ourselves. You know, I put down, if you love your enemies, you won. If you give sympathy, you win. Because now it's not all about me, now it's about you. If I give sympathy to you when you have. Psalms 118, verse 5 and 6 says, fear not what man can do. Man cannot take you from God. That's your choice. So, anybody, we got 1 minute. Anybody got a comment? Buzzer's gonna buzz, except they don't buzz me but that one time.